LegalMatch has been great because every day I wake up, I see people who have legal issues, and sometimes they're people that I just can't help. Sometimes they're unrealistic. They're lay people, and they really don't understand in some cases what they're up against, and their case is just not something that can be pursued. But I get the opportunity to talk to people who have gotten themselves in a situation where they need the help of a lawyer. They don't know what steps to take next. And LegalMatch is a very good format for those people to reach out to lawyers. And then from an attorney's perspective, it's a great opportunity for me to reach out to them, have a phone call, get the scope of work. I offer a 30-minute free consultation. So when people call me, they're going to at least get a real preliminary assessment of whether or not it's doable, whether or not they should go forward or take a different path. And LegalMatch is great at facilitating those conversations. COVID has scrambled a lot of eggs. A lot of practice isn't quite what it was, but a lot of my practice is remote. And I have clients that I've never met before, that they communicate via phone and email, and we exchange documents, and oftentimes I can negotiate on their behalf without ever having to meet them. And I think LegalMatch gives people an easier way to interact with lawyers. And a lot of people will call and they'll say, well, can we get together? And it's really, in many cases, unnecessary. So I think it's made the representation aspect of law practice easier for both the attorney and the client. And by the way, it should be noted that virtually all the courts, at least here in Washington, are doing their hearings and their trials remotely. So the platform is a virtual platform in the legal space. It's not the traditional walk into the courthouse. So I think LegalMatch is a good precursor for clients to get used to interacting in a digital space. What I like best about it is that clients can give their 2 cents. If a client is reasonably accurate and reasonably diligent in putting their concerns down, I can buzz through it. It's usually a couple of paragraphs. I can buzz through it. I can either say, can't help you, or just skip it if it's totally unrealistic, or give some pointers to the client. And as I tell them, they can hire me, they can hire somebody else, they can try to do it on their own. And that initial consulting period that I give them is something that they can use, at least, if nothing else, as a bit of education for them so that they can face and negotiate themselves in the legal space with a few more tools in their tool belt. I get leads every day. In fact, just before we got on this call, I set aside about a half hour to an hour almost every morning to go through the LegalMatch and figure out who I want to follow up with, what cases are unrealistic and need to be set aside. And then about once a week or so, maybe once every other week, depending on my workload, I go back and check the clients that I've contacted. And LegalMatch does a real good job of noting whether they've hired another lawyer, whether they're still looking, whether they're not looking anymore. And that way I can keep track of who's out there. I'll reach out to people and say, hey, how you doing? I noticed that you were still looking for a lawyer. Are there any questions that I can answer for you? And it's a fairly efficient use of my time. And I convert a handful of those cases every month. If my practice was limited to LegalMatch only, I probably wouldn't be able to be successful. But as a complement to the rest of my practice, it's a real nice tool to have. There's probably, of any 10 leads that come in, there's probably 3 or 4 that are just unrealistic. They're just people that don't understand what they could get as a remedy. They're not in a position where they can pursue it realistically, and they're just non-starters. Of the 6 or 7 that are left after that, there's usually 1 or 2 or so that I end up talking to in depth. It's probably about a 10 or 20% conversion rate. I've tried others, and it is the most successful for me from a standpoint of giving me enough information to decide whether or not I want to pursue it, from generally getting, it seems to me, getting the client enough information so that they don't come into a situation where they're totally ignorant or just wholly unrealistic. I can respond with a realistic estimate of what it's going to cost. They know that it's going to cost something. We can talk about that. It's always negotiable with me, but they know what my rates are. I give them expectations. They know what they're up against. It's the best of the lot that I have dealt with. From an attorney's perspective, you have to be persistent. You have to go through the list and figure out who's got something. Number one, you have to do that regularly. I do it every day. I think it behooves you to go back and look at those who you may not have corresponded with or you think may have hired another lawyer, because from time to time, they'll be available to hire an attorney. I think if you're diligent and you reach out to those clients and you answer their questions in a reasonable fashion, I think it is probably going to work for you. If you expect it to be a panacea, it's not going to work, but it's like anything else. It's worth what you put into it. And I've been very pleased. I would tell them that you've got to be patient, you've got to be diligent. So the monthly fee is affordable, I think, and you can't, if you enter it expecting there to be a panacea and clients who will pay you thousands of dollars immediately for anything posted, you're going to be tremendously disappointed. But if you're diligent about it, if you're working with people, if you're honest with people, you tell them in situations where you can't help them, you just can't help them. In lots of situations, I've given referrals to friends and acquaintances that I know are competent in certain areas. That's been helpful because those clients will come back and say, hey, you referred me to somebody to write a will, which is an area of practice I don't do. But now I've got a piece of property that I want to sell to a developer and the developer wants to negotiate. What do I do? So it's all about building goodwill, giving the potential client something to be helpful. You might not get a check right now from that client, but chances are you'll hear from them, you'll hear from their friends, you'll build a reputation in the community, and it'll pay off for you in the long run. It's cost effective. I think it would be a good way for a beginning attorney especially to build their practice, because you've got to get your name out there. You're limited in what you can do. I mean, there are few opportunities for CLE connections. They're all online these days. There's really no opportunity to find somebody in your area of practice, hand them a card, strike up a conversation with them, and build a referral practice. So this is a way to backfill some of the things that are not available during the COVID that have been traditional ways for lawyers to build their practice.